I know. I said no Some Ordinary Gamers videos for the foreseeable future after the mistakes I made. But I think this is a special exception, as I'm fulfilling a promise I already made to follow up on something. My fact-checking is finished. I've got my answers. Fact-checking about what, you may ask? Well, in friend of the channel Nicandros' video called Mutahar has been a fake engineer for 10 years, he floats the idea that Mutahar could be breaking Ontario law.
Now, I do want to give the disclaimer that I'm not a lawyer or a Canadian. I'm just a guy who looks stuff up online, and based on what I've read, it's actually illegal to call yourself an engineer if you are not a licensed engineer.
And he made a stronger implication about this later.
At least Pirate Software's lies didn't break the law.
If you saw me stream watching that video, you'll know I was critical of this escalation into legal territory as it was first brought up, when I felt there was a lack of certainty. And I wasn't sure that disclaiming your lack of expertise was enough to justify dropping that. Initially, I didn't think about it too much though, and watching the rest of the video, I just let it slide. Accepted it as, yeah, okay, maybe. After all, he did again emphasize his uncertainty in the last few minutes of the video.
Once again, I am not a lawyer. It might not be illegal for Mutahar to lie about being an engineer.
But over the next couple days, I watched this idea that he was breaking the law spread. People were squabbling about it all over the place. Very annoying to see, but it also became apparent to me that there was value in clearing this up, one way or the other. Like I said in my other video, see, I'm not just a hater, I'm testing claims other people have made. If they're wrong about it being illegal, I'll make sure everyone knows what goes down. If they're right about it being illegal, maybe you shouldn't have blocked people from saying engineer because it's actually you who can't say it. I genuinely don't know which is true though, which is why I asked the experts. To be clear, as you can hear there, I do think it would be really funny if he was correct. And based on my reading into it as a layman, I thought it was possible that some of the things that were pointed out could genuinely fall foul of legislation. So, to uncover the truth, what I did was decide to completely destroy Mutahar's life by reporting some of his videos to Professional Engineers Ontario who, if he's believed to be in violation, would likely inflict the insane punishment of asking him to please stop pretending to be an engineer. Yeah, that's kind of their thing. The majority of what they do is either ignoring old websites or asking people who have not illegally worked as unqualified engineers, but who simply falsely call themselves engineers, to voluntarily stop doing that. Look man, I'm a loose cannon. Mutahar potentially being politely asked to stop lying was a risk I was willing to take to get to the truth. And I agree with Mutahar's argument he made during his coverage of the Open Hand Foundation. You're not going to manifest criminal charges out of asking, and it's what these organizations are for. It is also a much less serious thing being brought to a much less imposing body. Of course, if there was a problem and someone refused to comply with their request, then they'll start trying to nail them. And maybe I wound people up a little bit by talking about the fines that can come out of that. Not in my videos, but in my streams. But were that to happen, an easy solution will be to simply stop breaking the law if they ask you to. Even the politician they tried to make an example of a decade ago, simply for saying in a televised debate that he's an engineer, was let off the hook when he apologized. It is true that there are technically potentially heavy fines, but you have to really go full retard to actually be hit with them. It's not exactly high stakes. The alleged illegal activity is all on tape, so there's no uncertainty about what's actually happened. This isn't just some nut making claims. The licensing body encourages anyone to get in touch regarding any possible violation, and they actually suggest that their hotlines are a way to clear up exactly the uncertainty I had about these claims being made. I understand people's hesitance to bring online IRL, but I think here that happened when the idea of him breaking the law spread, with people believing the guy's a criminal or something. And besides it potentially being really funny if, after censoring people saying engineer, it turned out he's not allowed to use that title. On the other side of it, it also sucks to be called a criminal by a bunch of people when you're not, and it's easily checked. Either way, people should know. So I checked, and I wanted it in writing so I could clear it up for everyone with proof. So what I did was email them the ad Mutahar did for Intel, where he used his claim of having worked as an engineer to boost his credibility, and claimed that he still was an engineer in the comments, alongside a few other much more recent examples of him claiming to be an engineer in a way that sounded to me like he was saying it may be his profession, which is the threshold for saying you're an engineer to be a violation, specifically in Ontario. Probably doesn't work like this where you live. First response was quick, and they simply said that I didn't provide enough evidence that Mutahar is connected to Ontario, but that they'd reconsider looking into him if I provided proof of that. So I sent them his Twitter bio and some clips of him saying that's where he lives. Fast forward to yesterday, and my prediction came true. My prediction is that they won't care. Here's my 200 IQ master plan. I'm gonna get PEO officially saying he has done nothing illegal, and then make a hit piece on Nicandros for not reporting him and checking whether it was illegal or not, for being lazy. Alright? It is the opinion of Professional Engineers Ontario that the evidence I provided does not constitute a violation of Ontario law. They quoted the provision in the statute I showed you earlier to emphasize that it's not literally using it alone that matters, which I understood, but brought up a point in that regard that I didn't expect. They said, an important consideration is whether or not the use of the title can clearly be attached to the province of Ontario. Although Mr. Anas is a resident of Ontario, none of his videos directly attach his use of the title to the province. If we were to interpret the statute otherwise, any person who called themselves an engineer on YouTube could be liable to prosecution under Ontario law, and that appears to be an absurd result. It would seem that despite being an Ontario resident, and perhaps even giving the impression he may be a professional engineer, he didn't in any video I sent or am aware of claim specifically to be an engineer in Ontario, which would now appear to be a basic requirement for it to even begin to be considered a title violation. It's not enough that the guy doing it is connected to Ontario, the claim has to be. But of course he's saying it on YouTube and not connecting it to his province in those videos. They then brought up a US case where a man was fined for calling himself an engineer in an email, but successfully challenged it on First Amendment grounds to demonstrate why Mutahar's usage would be protected by Section 2 of the Canadian Charter. I don't personally understand how that relates to calling yourself an engineer on an ad for Intel, or broadcasting publicly you are an engineer, in contrast with being a professional lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer either, which is why I asked the most relevant experts. And they wrapped it up by saying they don't see a need to look into it further, particularly because they have seen his apology, where he promises not to use the title engineer anymore. It would indeed, of course, be pointless to check any deeper when their typical action taken is to tell people to do what he's already agreed to do, wouldn't it? I won't speculate any further about that because I'm on the naughty step still and promised I wouldn't do that kind of thing for a while. But it would be remiss of me not to mention that Mutahar's apology followed Nicandros telling Mutahar's friend, who claimed to be talking to Mutahar about this, about the politician who was let off the hook when he apologized and stopped using the title. In conclusion, it's still very easy to argue Mutahar shouldn't have used his claims of being various kinds of engineers, of having an engineering background, of having gone to school for engineering, of having gone into engineering and had it work out, and many other claims, the way he has to bolster his credibility, or even directly argue that things are true, including accusing people of things. You can still comfortably say he's wrong to do all these things, but he is at least not literally criminally wrong. And I think such suggestions should have been checked more thoroughly before floating them if you decide to explore that avenue. Even if you couch it in uncertainty, make it clear you're not an expert, and say he might not be breaking the law, you're still putting forward a case that's going to convince people. And escalating things to a level that's not justified by the level of certainty, without further checking, is not the worst thing in the world, especially given how he couched it. And don't get me wrong, most of Nicandros' video is absolutely great and stands regardless. And my understanding is that the whole engineering thing is just a side point to what he'll really be covering later this month, but throwing things like this out there,
At least Pirate Software's lies didn't break the law.
I think that warrants fact-checking and pointing out if it's off base. Obviously, his speculation could also have been correct, which I would have made clear as well, but it seems it was not. And just because, as you may know, I'm friendly with the guy, doesn't mean I'm not going to be critical, as I'd hope he'd be with me. To his credit, as soon as I brought the results to his attention, he notified his audience, and I believe he plans to address it further. Anyway, you'll notice my tone's been a lot milder and less fun in this video. That's because I want to at least keep with the spirit of my apology video, even though you can hopefully understand why I felt obligated to make this particular update. I like to get a bit wild and have fun on the internet. I know a lot of people don't like my standard that anything someone's made public is fair game for any kind of commentary, and that won't be changing, but you gotta do it off a legit foundation, right? Anyway, take it easy, have a good day.